It started on one of those heavy mornings where the air feels like it's holding a grudge. Thick, warm, and restless, the kind of day where you can smell pavement and diesel even before the sun's all the way up. Kendra Miles stood at the bottom of the federal courthouse steps in downtown Charleston, South Carolina, clutching her briefcase like it was an anchor. 41 years old, she'd spent 2 decades fighting for the right to be here, to wear the robe, to finally call herself a federal judge. But that morning, she wasn't wearing a robe, just a simple navy dress and flat shoes. Her clerk had her credentials and was running late in traffic, so she was alone, just another black woman, trying to look invisible at the edge of power. She saw the cop leaning on the marble railing before he saw her, thick neck straining against his collar, mirrored sunglasses even in the shade. His name, she'd later learn, was Officer Grant Mercer. Locals already knew his reputation: rough hands, quick temper, and a string of complaints that never went anywhere. But to Kendra, he was just another obstacle, one she was too tired to even resent. She climbed the first step thinking about her oath, about how her grandmother used to say, "If you're going to work for justice, girl, be ready to bleed for it." "Hold up," he said, flat and low. She smiled like she always did with men like that. "Good morning, officer." He tilted his head, ran his eyes down her dress, her bag. "Public entrance is around the side." "I'm actually with the court," she said gently. "I'm starting today." He snorted. "Right. And I'm the governor. Move along." She felt her smile falter. "Sir, I'm Judge Kendra Miles, appointed to this district. My clerk is just behind me with my ID." His mouth twitched into something between a smirk and a sneer. "Judge, huh, lady? I've seen judges. They don't look like you." That line hung in the humid air, poisonous and obvious. Her heart kicked hard, but her voice stayed even. "This is my courthouse. Please step aside." He leaned in, sour coffee on his breath. "You people always do this, making trouble where there isn't any." She heard the words like a slap. "You're out of line, Officer Mercer," she said, eyes flicking to his nameplate. And that did it. You could almost see the blood rush to his face, the small tremor in his jaw as his world tilted. "Don't tell me my job," he spat. Then his arm moved. It wasn't a shove. It was a full-force, open-hand punch that cracked across her jaw. The sound it made, the kind you don't forget, bounced off the courthouse walls. She staggered back, stars exploding behind her eyes, the marble scraping her arm as she fell. A dozen phones went up at once, people gasping, someone yelling, "Oh my God, she's a judge!" Her clerk came running, briefcase with her nameplate swinging. Grant Mercer froze, eyes darting from the engraved letters to the woman bleeding on the steps. In one heartbeat, he knew he'd just hit a federal judge on the threshold of her own courthouse. They put her in a cold, windowless room inside, offered an ice pack, and whispered about misunderstandings. She sat silent, cheek throbbing, listening to the murmur of captains and union reps scrambling to bury the mess. A portly man from the police union came in, practiced sympathy, dripping from every word. "Judge Miles, a terrible mix-up. Our officer feels awful. High alert day. You understand?" She stared at him, the ice pack dripping onto her dress. "The department is prepared to issue a formal apology," he continued, "and we'd be happy to discuss a settlement to compensate you for your trouble. We'd all like to put this unfortunate incident behind us quietly." That word quietly lit a fire in her gut. How many other victims had they tried to buy off? How many cell phone videos had been lost? She didn't answer. She let the silence stretch until he shifted on his feet and left. That night she lay awake, pain dulling into something colder. They thought she was just another complainant to be managed, a lawsuit to be settled. They had no idea she'd been appointed for life. She rose, opened her closet, ran her hand over the heavy black robe hanging there. They had shown her their power. Now she would show them hers. 2 days later, the ceremonial courtroom was packed. Lawyers, reporters, police brass, all crammed into the tall windowed hall for the investiture of the district's new judge. Grant Mercer stood near the back in his dress blues, brass buttons gleaming, a smug confidence on his face. He thought the storm had passed. He thought the new judge was some gray-haired man who understood the way the world worked. The clerk stepped to the podium. "All rise." The chief judge spoke solemn words about justice, commitment, impartiality. And then he said the name. "Please welcome to the bench the Honorable Kendra Miles." Time slowed. A side door opened. She stepped out, black robe flowing, faint yellow shadow still visible on her cheek. The room gasped, whispers exploding like wildfire. Mercer's face went pale as chalk. The troublemaker he'd struck was now ascending to the bench above him. She didn't glance his way. She took her seat, adjusted the microphone, lifted the gavel. The crack echoed like a gunshot. Court was in session. Her first order wasn't a criminal case or a corporate dispute. It was a subpoena, the complete unredacted personnel file of Officer Grant Mercer. The police department stalled, objected, called it overreach. She wrote a motion so precise it cut through their excuses like glass. Within a week, a lieutenant delivered a fat accordion folder to her chambers. She opened it with a clerk at her sedan and found a career's worth of bruises, hidden behind bureaucracy, fractured bones, racial slurs caught on tape, a suspicious pattern of resisting arrest charges filed against people who had dared complain. Night after night, they went through it, cross-checking names and dates, calling victims. Most hung up too scared to speak his name. But when she said, "This is Judge Miles from the federal courthouse," the fear cracked just enough. A retired mechanic told her how Mercer had dislocated his shoulder during a stop for a broken taillight. A teenage girl sent over a copy of a voicemail he'd left her father laced with slurs. The pattern was undeniable, not a hot-headed cop, but a predator, using a badge like a weapon protected by a system that buried his sins to protect itself. After 2 weeks, she had a mountain of evidence. She drafted an order for a public disciplinary hearing to decide whether Officer Grant Mercer should stay on the force. The day of the hearing, the courtroom was even more crowded than the investiture. Press lined up, 3 deep victims clutching affidavits. City lawyers looking queasy. Mercer sat at the defense table in his uniform, sweat glistening on his forehead, jaw clenched. All rise. She entered slowly, black robe swaying the elevation of the bench, making the metaphor real. "This court is now in session for the disciplinary hearing of Officer Grant Mercer," she said calmly. The city's lawyer tried to paint him as decorated, stressed, misunderstood. It was a limp defense. Then she took over, not as a victim, but as a judge laying out the case herself. She played the cell phone clip of her own assault on the monitors. She showed hospital records of the retired mechanic. She read 12 other complaints into the record. Audio of Mercer screaming slurs at a teenager filled the room. Internal memos recommending anger management flashed on the screens, ignored year after year. With each new piece of evidence, Mercer seemed to shrink, the uniform hanging looser on his frame. The blue wall he'd hidden behind was coming down brick by brick. Finally, she laid her papers down, removed her glasses, and looked straight at him. "Officer Mercer," she said quietly, but every syllable carried. "The badge you wear is not a license for brutality. It's a symbol of public trust, a trust you've violated again and again. Today in this courtroom, we see you for what you are." She lifted a single sheet, his termination order. "Pursuant to the authority vested in this court, effective immediately, your employment is terminated." She signed her name in a clean, deliberate stroke. "Bailiff," she said, voice ringing with finality, "take his badge." A uniformed officer walked over, ripped the silver badge from Mercer's chest, tore the patches from his shoulders. In seconds, he was no longer Officer Mercer. He was just Grant, an unemployed man in a costume. She stood. "This hearing is adjourned." The gavel struck. It wasn't revenge. It was the sound of a debt finally paid. That night, she sat in her office, overlooking the city robe draped over a chair, the glow of the streetlights catching in the glass. Firing one man wouldn't fix a broken system. The culture that had protected him still pulsed in the shadows. But it was a start. It was proof the system could still bend toward justice if someone pushed hard enough from the inside. She felt not triumph, but a quiet, bone-deep peace. For the first time in weeks, she let herself breathe. And maybe that's where we all come in, not just watching, but asking the harder questions. What does justice really mean to you? Is it punishment, or is it restoring balance and faith? Have you ever seen someone abuse their power and wish somebody had the strength to make it right? Drop your thoughts in the comments, tell your stories, argue, debate, because your voice matters, and sometimes a single voice raised at the right moment can crack a wall that stood for decades.